What is up, Pelsickos? I'm Death Valley coming at you with yet another 2025-2026 NBA season look ahead on to the Philadelphia 76ers, which means I'm super stoked to be joined by the one, the only, Mr. Brian Toporek. He covers the Sixers for Liberty Ballers. You can also find his written work at Forbes and Fansided, and he does fantastic things behind the scenes and has helped me out of many, many pickles and improved many, many of my articles over at Bleacher Report. We've got work together for like over a decade. We're getting pretty old. Follow him on the socials at B Toporek. That's at BTOPOREK. This is going to be a depressing podcast. Let's start with a fun question. How the heck are you doing, Brian?
I am good. Thank you for having me. As always, Dan, good to be back. I'm sorry I missed this last year. I had just had my second child, or my wife had just had my second child. So we were knee deep in the throes of newborndom, but he is now a little after 1 year old, 13 months, now walking around the house, terrorizing us. So we are back in the podcast game. And I got to say, I saw you had the GOAT, Caitlin Cooper, on for the Pacers pod. I saw her repping the HardwoodKnocks merch. Can't say I have the HardwoodKnocks shirt on, but I do have some vintage NBA Jam.
Oh, yeah.
Philadelphia 76ers. And let's see, for those watching the video, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And please note, Ben Simmons' 3-point rating on this shirt is a big red bar, a 0, which really summarizes my relationship with the Philadelphia 76ers over the last 10 plus years.
What a shirt. What a mic drop to just begin things.
Thank you. Yeah. My wife got this for me after he got traded. So I'm pretty sure it was just like a 50% off deal. I see what she's doing. But I don't know if she was intentionally trolling me because I had lived through the Ben Simmons era and she just thought I wanted to be reminded of it. But then I did see the 3-point rating. I was like, you know what? This was actually good. And I have been stopped. Back when we lived in Baltimore, someone stopped me in a grocery store one time, said he loved the shirt. It's like, man, what could have been? It's like, you know what, sir? You were absolutely right. What a great, profound question about this team. What could have been?
So it's equal parts catharsism and masochism.
Correct.
Is what the shirt represents. No respect.
Really what following the Sixers is.
I respect it. I respect the hell out of your wife even more now. And I think we all know why the little one is being a terror. It's because you skipped the look ahead last year. And so I'm happy that he is extracting retribution on our behalf. But I am excited to talk to you about this team because I don't know what to make of this team. They are confusing as hell, even if you bake in, or even if you just extricate the big variable of, well, let's just say that they're going to be healthy. I still don't necessarily understand what this team could be. But I think we should start with the breaking news happened a few hours before we began this podcast. My general question to you is, now that the Quentin Grimes situation has been hashed out, how do you feel about how it ended and how it ended up impacting just the Sixers' overall offseason?
Yeah, I mean, what a complete dud of a 3-month drawn-out saga for this to end, 8 hours before the qualifying offer deadline for him to just take the qualifying offer. I wrote a couple days ago that this would be kind of the worst case scenario for all sides. And I just don't really understand how we got here. I think based on the reporting that has come out really throughout the whole process, like even dating back before free agency, I remember Tony Jones of The Athletic reported he was going to be looking for like $25 million a year, which just, you're not reading the market if you think that was a realistic ask. I mean, that's just what Josh Giddey got from the Chicago Bulls. And, for the questions about the viable questions, I think, about Josh Giddey as a playoff performer, he just has a much more established track record in the NBA. Quentin Grimes had a phenomenal run with the Sixers over the 28 games that he played after the trade deadline. But it was 28 games on a team that was circling the drain. That, Embiid, I think, played 5 of those games. Maxey and George, it was like 9 and 10. So
that many?
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Out of breath.
But, he put up big numbers in a role that he's not going to play. on a fully healthy Sixers team, or even, if he goes somewhere in the summer of 2026 and in a role on his next team, that I don't think he's the number one option on a championship contender by any means. So I think his agent was being completely unrealistic. With that said, if the reports are true about the Sixers offering 4 years, $39 million, which is basically his qualifying offer over 4 years with 8% annual raises, or the report came out today that they offered him I think it was $100,000 more than his qualifying offer to waive the veto rights on his trade. And that's just insulting. We just saw Nikola Jovic get 4 years, $60 million or $62 million from the Miami. Quentin Grimes is not going to settle for less than that. So I think from the Sixers' perspective right now, before they re-signed Grimes, they were about $9.8 million below the first apron. They were around 22, I think a little bit below 22, below the second apron. And if they wanted to preserve use of the taxpayer mid-level, which is around $5.7 million, they use that, they're hard capped at the second apron. So you do the math, and a $16 million starting salary was probably the red line that they weren't willing to cross. Now, you could rightfully point out at this time of year, they're probably not going to use the taxpayer mid-level exception. There's no free agent on the market who's worth that amount of money. And I'm sure they would push back and say, but wait until, let's see what happens in the buyout market. Let's see what happens midway through the season. To which I would respond, A, you cannot use the taxpayer mid-level exception as a trade exception. You can only do that with the room and the non-taxpayer. And B, if you're over the first apron, you can't sign guys on the buyout market who are earning more than the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. So if there is a mythical free agent out there who is earning less than the non-taxpayer mid-level that gets bought out and is worth the taxpayer mid-level exception, I will eat my words 5 months from now. Until then, I do not think they're going to use the taxpayer mid-level. So, could they have gone up to 18 million? Probably. But there's, their party line was, we want to preserve long-term flexibility. We're worried about how his deal is going to age. But, now looking back, knowing that he takes the qualifying offer, they could have paid Yabu. So congratulations on getting Yabu for even less, slightly less than the taxpayer MLE. But, they would have had room to spare under the second apron if they had used the taxpayer MLE to keep Yabu, and then Grimes took the qualifying offer.
Doesn't the implication of all this, though, make it seem like their goal is just going to be duck the tax entirely, which, as you noted, they are one Kelly Oubre Jr. or Quentin Grimes waiving his implicit no trade clause away from making happen? That would be my read of all this, to where let's say they knew that this is how it was going to end. I'm not convinced that they would have tried to keep Gershon Yabusele anyway.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think they love giving themselves an escape hatch, and they find increasingly creative ways to oops, we just managed to deduct the tax. All we had to do was spend 2 second-round picks to dump KJ Martin's contract, even though we had a team option on it, and we could have just declined it. But so maybe this year they'll get picks back with their tax-ducking salary dump instead of giving picks up. That would be a nice change of pace for them. But yeah, I mean, it seems like, to me, this sends a signal. Them not using the taxpayer mid-level, I understand, because you didn't want to do that first. You don't want to hard cap yourself, because then that does give, the Nets okay, they can only spend $16 million on Grimes. If we give him $18 million, whatever, 19, 20 as a starting salary, we can even structure it so it descends, but they can't match it unless they salary dump somewhere else. So I get it from that perspective. But now, having seen how things play out, it feels just like a vote of no confidence in this group as a viable championship contender, which is just a complete change of pace from how they were going into last season. And it's, I understand it, given the health status of Embiid, Paul George, even Jared McCain already suffered a thumb injury. He's going to miss the first couple weeks of the season. But look around the East, and the opportunity is arguably much more wide open than it was last season. So there's a world wherein this team could be a viable playoff or even championship contender this year. So it's baffling that we're having the conversation of they have that in their range of outcomes, and then they also have duck the tax at the trade deadline.
Does it make it, I have a bigger picture question, but does this make it more likely that Quentin Grimes is on the Sixers past February's deadline, or less likely that he's on the Sixers? Because the nuances of, okay, maybe they want to get out of the tax, but he can veto any trade, and his bird rights are not going to transfer if he gets moved. So I think that adds like an interesting complication here. And so if I'm the Sixers, it's almost, are you going to just end up, if you want to duck the tax, is Kelly Oubre just the guy because he can't stop you?
Right. Yeah, I think it almost has to be. I think this does make it more likely that he stays the whole year, because one would assume, I mean, I don't know, his agent had like some pie in the sky dreams about the sign and trade materializing, which tells me he just doesn't understand base year compensation. And also, like, I don't really know that his agent is giving him the best advice here. So we should include that caveat. But assuming he's getting good representation, the agent would say it is in your best interest to decline any trade this year so that the Sixers can maintain your bird rights. If they want to re-sign you next summer, we can put all hard feelings aside. And if they give you the biggest offer, that's great. You stay with them. Otherwise, you go explore teams with cap space. But as you noted, it's only going to be non-bird rights that go with him to any team that goes with any team he gets traded to. So, you know, the max starting salary he can get with non-bird rights is in like the
top 10,
right? Yeah, it's like, it's not very high. I mean, I think the 4-year total is around $45 million, like way below with the non-MLEs.
You're going to be looking at you're hoping for a non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Like if that's what your non-bird rights are getting you, that deal, the other deal is going to be more attractive with a mid-level exception. So right. Given all of this that you've just talked about, what then is the Sixers' actual end game entering into this season? Because if this is a vote of no confidence in their core as a title contender, which, by the way, is fair because of the injuries to not just Jared McCain now, but like, what is Joel Embiid? What is Paul George? I understand it, but then what is the end game? Because you have these two aging stars that are on massive contracts for at least the next 3 years on your roster. And in theory, if you get lucky and Joel Embiid is healthy, have you put yourself in the best position to optimize a healthy Joel Embiid? And if the answer is no, is the end game you're hoping that you can trade him? Because that doesn't seem, that seems far-fetched on so many levels, but I don't, if they're not trying to catch lightning in a bottle, I guess is what I'm saying, I don't understand what they're attempting to do here.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I think that's a very fair critique of their approach. And frankly, going back to the decision to go in on 3 max contracts to begin with, you could argue the only way it's going to work is if you basically flip a middle finger to the second apron and you're just willing to spend, like, you're willing to spend whatever it takes to re-sign a Quentin Grimes, even if you go over the second apron, and there will be a lot of team building restrictions with that. Or maybe you don't go over, but, you know, give them close $20 million and you're still not facing the can't aggregate contracts, but still
what the Knicks are doing.
Salary. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Cause you're already trying to thread the needle in this new team building model with a 3 max star build. And if you're also then going cheap on the supporting cast to the point where you're not willing to re-sign the guy who averaged 22, 5, and 4 for you over the final third of the season, it's like, what are we doing here? I will say last year they went into training camp like they were very clearly focused on the big picture. Remember, they have the ESPN interview with Tim Bontemps where Morey says, we're focused on April, May, and June, and we're probably not going to play Embiid and Paul George in back-to-backs many, if at all, this year because we're just so laser focused on the playoffs. They forgot that they needed to make the playoffs first, which, as it turned out, they did not do, even come close to it. So this year, one of the big running themes of Media Day was basically like, we're taking it day by day. We know we have a lot to prove this year. Like Nick Nurse said, like, we've got to work our way back into the tournament. So they are clear-eyed that nothing is guaranteed for them this year. And it sounds like they are fully expecting Joel Embiid to miss some time this year. Paul George is unclear if he's going to be ready to start the season. So one of the other running themes that they were discussing was like, you need to have an identity and a style that is you, no matter who is playing on a game-to-game basis, this is what you are getting if you are playing the Philadelphia 76ers. And what that is not entirely clear. They dropped a couple hints. I think we'll see it, as soon as this first preseason game, but probably not till really the regular season. But I think that's kind of the big storyline going into the year is like, what is this new version of the Sixers that, they are fully expecting? I mean, this is really the first time in Joel Embiid's career where they're going into a season not expecting to be carried him on both ends of the court.
What do you think is then a realistic expectation for Joel Embiid? Maybe not even from we need him to be this, but like, what is the franchise then actually counting on from him? Is it X number of games that would declare this a success or that they're targeting? At this point, do you also just default to it doesn't matter how much they manage him or try to manage him, like he's not going to be at peak form by the time the playoffs roll around anyway? Like, if this is how they're approaching, because it's almost like how the Pelicans, at least previously, tried to approach their team build with Zion, is we want to have this identity or the ability to survive without him. And if that is how you're approaching a build around your 10-pole star, you've kind of already lost, because like the whole theory of that team should be we need to be at our peak when they are on the floor. And so what are their expectations, or to you, just like your zoomed out views, like what are just their expectations and views around Joel Embiid right now moving forward?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact quote because Morey specifically was asked, like, what are your expectations about Joel Embiid? And he said, we're not getting into the expectations game. The doctor's advice, what Joel said on listening to his body, which is a big component of how doctors manage injuries. So that's going to be what carries the day this year. And Joe said, the big quote that got everyone's attention was, I want to be as honest as possible. I think going forward, just going to listen to the body. I'll be honest and say that it's going to be unpredictable at times, and that's okay. We've got to work with that. We got to take it day by day and go from there. So, again, I think they are implying, both Joe and Morey and, Maxey, Nick Nurse, everyone, basically saying, like, we are fully expecting Joel Embiid to miss time. We don't know how much. We don't, to me, that's saying this is just a chronic condition he's going to deal with for the rest of his career. We'll never know the details of it until he retires, if we ever get it, because that's just how they operate. But it sounds like it's just something that he's going to have to deal with. And so I don't think they're saying we are hoping for him to play 55, 60 games in 30 minutes a night. I think they're looking at it as like, whatever we get out of him is a bonus, but we cannot count on him. I mean, last year was the first time in his career that he was not the leading scorer on the team. And, I would be surprised, I think, if he was the leading scorer this year. I just think they're going to try to, especially early in the year, I would imagine they're going to try to keep his minutes relatively in check and make sure we don't deal with kind of the up and down nature that we saw last year with his knee. Like, let's make sure everything is as good as it can be before we really start to ramp up more. So I think they know that when Joe is on the floor, and Maxey has said this as well, like, when we're going to have this style, but there are going to be exceptions. When Joe's on the floor, he's going to get double teamed, and that means we're going to play a different way to some extent. But we still need to have this central identity, which just seems to just be like, we're going to play fast. We're going to be physical. We're going to, run up the floor. I think they're going to be a little more fast paced than they have been in past years. At least that's what they've been alluding to, because they're one of the slower paced teams over the past 2 years under Nick Nurse. Even when healthy, Embiid was never the fastest guy up or down the floor. But now they have so many guards in the backcourt that I think to me, it sounds like they're trying to just become more of a backcourt-centric and backcourt-led team with Embiid and Paul George as like key supporting pillars, rather than we have built our team around these two guys and we have these young guards as the supporting cast.
So I guess I have a twofold question here then, is even if you're using that caveat to describe Joel Embiid and Paul George, do they have the personnel that you believe? I know you mentioned that they're going to lean into the guards. Do they have the personnel to play faster? I mean, there's low-hanging fruit where this team could just get out in transition. Like, they've been a low transition team for the most part for a while. But do they have the personnel to do that? And then two, how hard is that to maintain, though, where you're not only talking about Joel Embiid being in and out of the lineup, but also Paul George being the same way, and how much is he buying into a scaled-down role as part of all this? And then the other thing is, how do you sort of balance Quentin Grimes is now really going to be playing for his next contract that he has no idea whether it's going to come from the Sixers or another team? Like, how hard does it get to, like, the variables of the injuries? Okay, sure. But now just the variables of this is the type of personnel we have at the top of the roster versus also just like the circumstances of, oh, we have this a bunch of guys, not even just Quentin Grimes, like Kelly Oubre Jr., Andre Drummond, even guys who have to understand that on some level they are placeholders here.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that caught my eye from Media Day was Nurse was talking about just the versatility that they have on the floor with all of these different guards. And I'm trying to see, he specifically said, yeah, it should be able to keep energy up with some shorter stints just because of their sheer numbers, which was just so an anti-Nick Nurse thing to say. I mean, you know, early last season, Tyrese Maxey was playing like 40 minutes a game when George and Embiid were out of the lineup and they suffered a hamstring injury. But even still, like over the entire season, 37.7 minutes per game back in his Raptors days. I mean, like, you know, it was like Fred VanVleet, Siakam, OG Anunoby were often three of the top 5 or top 10, if not top 5 in the NBA in total minutes played or minutes per game played. So he's always kind of, he always got like the Canadian Tibbs moniker applied to him. But I think we saw last year with the Thunder and with the Pacers in particular that, you know, kind of youth and depth might be ruling the day, especially in the regular season. I remember in the exit interview, Morey was kind of saying like teams are just playing harder even in the regular season. Like usually you saw that more in the playoffs and they weren't playing as hard during the regular season, but now perhaps because teams are moving away from the 3-star model and like we have more just well-rounded rosters across the league, like teams that lean into their depth are fresher. And it sounds like the Sixers, at least in theory, have internalized that. So I think they're going to kind of lean on that. And, you know, going back to your point about the personnel, like they're pretty thin really at forward. It's Oubre, Paul George, it's Justin Edwards, I guess, and then Trendon Watford, who they signed this offseason. Like I think Dominic Barlow and Jabari Walker, who both of them are on 2-way deals, like I think they're going to play real minutes for this team. The impression I get is they are planning on kind of leaning on their depth more than you would expect out of a Nick Nurse team.
Do you think when you're looking at them having so many guards who aren't quite wings is how I would classify them, in VJ Edgecombe, in Quentin Grimes, in Jared McCain, in Tyrese Maxey, even in Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon being on this roster, are we going to see a lot of just like, these are super, like we're talking VJ Edgecombe is your 3, seems like a default, but it's, Quentin Grimes is just, like, are we going to see a ton of that, or are they going to try and mitigate that maybe as much as possible?
I think we're going to see a lot of that. Nurse specifically said he could see VJ playing the 1 or the 3. He even said he could see a 4-guard rotation at times. So, yeah, I think 3-guard lineups are going to happen a lot. Would not shock me if we even see some 4-guard looks, which is like the ideal that Sixers fans have wanted to see around Joel Embiid for years. The platonic ideal is just Embiid with 14 guards, and we are so close. We are really the closest we've ever been to that. So yeah, I think, you know, like I was looking at rosters around the league last year as soon as he said that, and you know the Pacers had Halliburton, Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith are all listed at 6'5". The Cavs won 64 games last year, starting Darius Garland, who's 6'1", Donovan Mitchell, who's 6'3". Max Strus was out for part of the year, but I think he started 37 games together. He's 6'5". The Warriors last year, you know, 6'2" Stephen Curry, 6'5" Moses Moody, 6'5" Brandon Pajemski, 6'7" Jimmy Butler, 6'6" Draymond Green. That was their starting lineup. that got them in the playoffs.
Which, yes, but I also look at, you can point to one or two guys on that team on those teams to say, oh, I see them being able to defend bigger wings, or in Draymond's case, like he can actually hold up against bigs. When I look at the Sixers, just as like this is a sloppy example, but who do you trust? Like, who's the best wing defender do you trust the most to defend caps lock wing players out of? But I mean, the answer is Justin Edwards. But between Quentin Grimes, VJ Edgecombe, and like, who else you throw in? Paul George, I guess you could throw into that mix too when you look at his advanced age. And that's where I start to get like, okay, like what are they supposed to do there defensively when you're looking on the perimeter aside from just overwork Justin Edwards? Is it VJ Edgecombe yet? Like who are you trusting more to defend wings out of that troika of George, Edgecombe, and Grimes?
Yeah, I mean, George, as bad as he was offensively last year, actually rated pretty well defensively. So especially if they're not putting as much of an offensive load on him. I mean, Father Time is undefeated, so we'll see what he looks like, and he's coming off a knee surgery, so certainly not bullish on him early in the year. Edgecombe, it does sound like they've been very impressed so far. I'm sure there's going to be, he was saying his welcome to the NBA moment was catching a screen from Andre Drummond, so I'm sure there's going to be a couple of those in the early going to the season, but I think that's what made him so attractive to the Sixers was that he's got that defensive mentality to him. Like Maxey specifically called that out. He's just a bulldog and he like really plays hard on every possession. So I think even if he doesn't have the Jason Tatums when healthy, or like if LeBron James is playing the three, they don't really have the personnel to necessarily deal with that. And I think that's an area where if they are healthy in January and they are, in that mix with the Cavs and Knicks potentially as like, oh, this team actually might be able to make some noise in the playoffs. I think that's the clear area that they would look to upgrade. But for the time being, I think they're kind of just going to try to lean into their strengths. And if that means going more small ball and kind of conceding that as a weakness, they'll see what other pressure points going small and having this many versatile playmakers on the floor creates for the opponents. And if you see more of the playoffs where it's like, oh, okay, we found one thing and we're just going to spam it over and over again. But you don't see that as much in the regular season if you're not playing a Doc Rivers team, at least.
And you wonder if they go downsize that much, though, does it make it harder to where, okay, Paul George grades out really well defensively last season, but when you look at like the assignments he's on, to where it's like it's different going from like, all right, you go defend Miles Bridges or a Josh Hart or somebody. It's just like easier to defend those types of guys. And if you don't want him on like these sort of power wings that are going to control the offense, you'd rather see him on Andrew Wiggins, or just some like a wing of that archetype. And maybe Andrew Wiggins might be a stretch. So I'm curious if downsizing could hurt them there. But I wanted to ask you about VJ Edgecombe, kind of a twofold question of, you already kind of mentioned the defense. How big of a role do you expect him to play out of the gate? And then is there anything else about his fit on this roster that especially intrigues you or maybe even concerns you in year one?
Yeah, I think the shooting is the swing skill for him. So if it seems like, this is the time of year that Sixers fans love to break down grainy footage of, still framed shots or slow down 5-second videos of shot footage to see what a player's release looks like. Seems like his release is a little more in front of his face and a little quicker than it was coming out of college. So if that holds, and if, I'm not expecting a Maxey-esque leap where not really expected to be a great shooter coming out of college, and then all of a sudden it was like a 40% shooter right away. But if he is a neutral to positive 3-point shooter, that's going to get him on the floor even more. I'm very curious to see how it plays out, because obviously McCain is going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season with the UCL injury. So one would think Maxey is locked in as the starting point. Embiid will be.
Imagine if he wasn't.
Yeah, well, no, I'm saying, Maxey and Embiid are locked in when healthy. Paul George is locked in when healthy. We'll see if he starts the season or not. But that kind of leaves 2 spots open. One would think Oubre would get one of them, and maybe if Paul George misses the first little bit of the season, Oubre slides up to the 4. But when fully healthy, I'm curious to see if it's Edgecombe or Grimes starting alongside Maxey, because now, I mean, one of the many downsides of Grimes taking this qualifying offer, unless something drastically changes between the Sixers and his agent over the next 9 months, there was this like massive gulf in what he wanted and what the Sixers were willing to pay him. And that kind of sends the signal that this is probably your last year in Philly, in which case the Sixers have more incentive to work on the development of Edgecombe and McCain and less so with Grimes. So I wonder, especially now, not that training camp is like so the end all be all because it's 2 days for the Sixers, but the guys were working. They were like, most of them were in the facility for a majority of September, and Grimes was not there because he was still in this contract dispute. So I think Edgecombe has an early advantage in that regard over him. We'll see how things play out whenever Grimes does rejoin the team, but I'm not convinced that Grimes is the starting 2 guard to start the season. Like, it would not totally shock me if they just say, you know what, Edgecombe, like, we need to see what we have in this VJ Edgecombe kid, or maybe they start all 3 together, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, I'm not saying start all 3, but really prioritizing Edgecombe. This is someone that you just used a top 3 pick on. If all you're saying about them wanting to kind of establish an identity independent of Joel Embiid and Paul George, and they want that to be like up the floor, like getting up and down the floor, he's going to give you probably just based off his, he'll give you more value defensively against wings, I think, than Quentin Grimes at this point. And the other thing too, is you kind of mentioned this at the top, I was looking back at my summer league notes for him just before, because I scoffed when you said like they could see him playing the 1. In my summer league notes, he's really calm and collected on the ball and he could work on the ball. It's the off ball stuff that is concerning. Like the jumper just never popped there. Mm-hmm. So you just have more equity invested in him at this point. So it would be weird not to prioritize. You'll have to go through growing pains, I'm sure, but you've kind of already telegraphed with what you've done this offseason, the way you handled the Quentin Grimes situation specifically, that to some degree, you are looking at the bigger picture and maybe aren't as invested in the overall results of not even just regular season wins, but the overall results of this season. And so he's clearly more important for that longer term baseline than Quentin Grimes would be at this point.
Right. It's not like a full-fledged Warriors 2 timeline model, because Maxey is kind of that bridge where he's young enough that he could be part of that next generation, but he's also good enough that if George and Embiid do stay healthy and they surprise, then he's still going to be locked into that lineup, and maybe they do prioritize Grimes at that point if Edgecombe does have some early struggles. But as you said, I think they've invested enough in him, and they are kind of towing the line between if things continue to go south with George and Embiid's health-wise, we need to start looking ahead big picture to whatever the next iteration of this team is. And, barring a complete disaster and or whatever happens with the aspiration scandal, this is probably going to be the last top 3 pick that the Sixers get for a while. So they need Edgecombe to really hit.
Jared McCain, assuming that he's going to get and stay healthy at some point, what is the area of his development that you'll be tracking most closely this year?
Yeah, I think it's got to be defense. That was the big question. He was so dynamic offensively as a playmaker, as a shooter, really took some pressure off of Maxey. I think Maxey really struggled early last season when Embiid especially was not on the floor, and teams could throw so much more defensive attention at him than he was used to. And having that secondary playmaker and McCain on the floor was a godsend for him in that regard. And it's a distant memory now, but in mid-December, Jared McCain looked like the runaway favorite to win Rookie of the Year. But the question was, even at the time, both of those guys are 6'2". Can you play them together? Or if not, is McCain just going to be a 6-man, a really, really good 6-man for this team? But what does that mean for his long-term future? especially now in the context of the VJ Edgecombe pick as well. Like, can those three guys play together long term? So I think how really like Maxey McCain backcourt fares defensively is probably, they have a lot to sort out with those four guys. Grimes' future obviously beyond this year, but like big picture, are Maxey McCain compatible defensively? I think kind of determines where they go next in terms of who are your two starting backcourt players, assuming you have a more traditional lineup. And, is McCain going to be, could he be in that lineup, or is he like destined to be a six man on this team? And does that make him some very high end trade bait a year or two from now?
Is there an urgency to kind of figure that out sooner rather than later? Just because you do have Maxey under contract, McCain's going to be cost controlled for another few years, but you still do have these veterans on the roster and Embiid and George, and so you're not totally slow playing this thing. And so don't you kind of want like a real meaningful glimpse into, well, what does it look like when these two play together, and what would be our ceiling? Or do they even not have that? Because I would argue defensively, I don't know if they have the personnel to really get the best type of look at, well, what does this look like if we view them as the backcourt of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably more urgency with Grimes just since he's up after this season, whereas McCain, you got 2 more years before he becomes extension eligible. But like, certainly you do not want to have Jared McCain be your 9th man and playing 5 minutes per game off the bench. Like, whenever he is healthy enough to play, he should be playing, and he should be playing a lot, and you should be experimenting with, which combinations of players, whether it's Maxey, Edgecombe, Grimes, Embiid, George, some of the other guys on the roster, like, who does he work best with? What archetypes of players is he compatible with? And how does that fit with our bigger picture vision of how this roster is moving forward?
What were your impressions of Justin Edwards this season and his role on this team moving forward? I also will have I gave him my last redraft that I did, because I redrafted the 2024 class, I think 3 times throughout the season last year.
Sure.
He came very close at the All-Star one. I had him number 15. And in my final one in April, I dropped him down to number 20. Because I actually think that I don't think he's going to be a star, to be clear, but he's just a 6'8" wing who understands how to shoot and defend. And I somehow feel like that when we're talking about younger players, that we don't appreciate that nearly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was an absolute revelation for them. And they got him on a very affordable contract for the next couple of seasons. So a godsend all around for a team with, 3 very expensive contracts to find a rotation caliber wing. And it's even cheaper than a minimum deal this year. I guess it's the 1-year min. So, yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like the fact that they don't have a ton of forward depth behind Oubre and George means he's going to have to play a lot. Morey brought him up unprompted a lot at the end of last season, him and Adem Bona, about like, young guys who they see as kind of key to this roster moving forward. I mean, I think he really struggled in Summer League. Obviously not like some guys, the format is just not for what they're good at. Like, I don't know that Justin Edwards has got like multi-time all-star upside. I think he is just going to be a really good role player, but like you can carve out a 10-year career in the NBA just being a 3-and-D role player. And I think that's, when he's surrounded by stars and he's not drawing a ton of defensive attention and just needs to knock down open shots and defend well, he is more than capable of doing that. So I think just seeing that with the fully healthy version of this team, again, they've got him under contract for 3 years. So it's not like there's no urgency to figure out, do we need to re-sign this guy next summer? They've got him locked in, but you still want to figure out, like, can we rely on this guy as a key wing piece moving forward? And, we joked about the tax dump earlier, but like, if they do decide to go tax dumping Kelly Oubre at the deadline, like, is Justin Edwards ready for an even bigger role at that point?
You mentioned a bunch of like the different bigs before, Jabari Walker, Trenton Watford, we like kind of a big. There's Andre Drummond's here. They have a Adem Bona. Nick Nurse had said that there's just this open competition for non-Embiid big minutes. How, from your perspective right now, like who intrigues you the most of that group? And do we also see the Sixers maybe lean into more of where we saw a lot of Yabusele at the 5? Should we expect to see a lot of Trendon Watford at the 5? Maybe if even Jabari Walker playing a ton of 5? Do you think that's a look without Embiid on the court that you see them end up favoring?
Yeah, I mean, in games where Embiid doesn't play, it's certainly possible. I think they had to get really weird last year at the 5 because not only was Embiid so banged up, but Drummond was as well. He missed a ton of time with a toe injury, and even when he came back, he didn't look like his former self. Sounds like he's been full go this year, and so I think they'll probably be a little more traditional with just Drummond Bona in the non-Embiid games, and then obviously when Embiid plays, you can be very traditional with those 3. So, I mean, of that group, like Andre Drummond is who he is at this point. You know, he's in his early 30s. He's not going to suddenly, I mean, unless they have been hiding this from us, like I don't think he's got like a late career Brook Lopez 3-point bomber turn in him. I think he's just going to be, you know, slow-footed pick and roll defender, but one of the best rebounders of his generation. And you're going to just live with those trade-offs. I think Bona is the guy that they've kind of been hyping up as he made some real strides this summer. You saw it a little bit in Eurobasket. I think Drummond said he added 2 inches to his vertical over the summer. So he's going to
do that. How do you just add 2 inches to your vertical? I'm assuming it's easier than just growing 2 inches like Derek Lively apparently did.
You're telling me you don't add 2 inches to your vert every summer? Come on, man. We just got some.
Last time I checked my vertical, I think it was negative.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't think they got to ask that at media day, but we'll see. I mean, he's got the youth, the springiness, the explosiveness that they've. I mean, honestly, like especially under Morey, they've just churned through like, you know, DeAndre Jordan, Paul Millsap, Dwayne Dedmon, just like name a washed 30-something, and that has been their answer behind Embiid for most of the past 3 years. So it's nice to see. I mean, like
Hodge Gibson is just sitting out there. He'll come out of retirement, right?
They got an open roster spot, man. Now they got money to spend too. I mean, that was what made B-Ball Paul such a revelation. Was like he was just this lightning bolt of energy that they otherwise did not have, and I think Bona is going to function in that same role. So he's another one where he's locked up cheap for another couple of years, and when you got these big contracts, you know, any hits you can find, especially in the second round, are worth their weight in gold. So I think they're certainly hoping that Bona is of that ilk.
So what are sort of how do you view the outlines of his game? I called him. I don't remember if I posted on social media or wrote it, but he reminds me of like a healthy Robert Williams, but with Mitchell Robinson's kind of offensive instincts.
Okay. I like it. Yeah, I mean, you're not...
Well, I mean, Mitchell Robinson's offensive instincts are a little... those aren't great, but...
Right, yeah. I mean, Bona's average shot distance last year was 2.3 feet. So, did not...
Was his assist rate higher or lower than that?
4.4%.
It was high.
Yeah. 4.4%. Let's go. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see, like, kind of what strides he made last year because they didn't really ask a ton of him. You know, late in the year, he actually did show some flashes. So it was like, oh, they might have something. I think it was, yeah, I'm trying to pull it up here. I mean, again, this is Quentin Grimes territory. So we're playing out the string on a completely lost season, but final 9 games of the year in which they went 1-8. So keep that in mind. But he had 15 points, 9 rebounds, 3 blocks, and on 31 minutes a game. So I don't know. I mean, if he used that to propel himself and that carries over to Eurobasket and that his play at Eurobasket carries over to year 2 in the NBA, I mean, Drummond made it sound like he's just kind of more confident in himself all around. He just positioning wise knows where he's supposed to be. I think, you know, is gonna jump out of the gym as a shot blocker. But yeah, you're probably not expecting a ton of offense beyond just lobs and put back dunks at the basket.
That he would be another bellwether for how invested are they in developing for the future this season, right? Because I know Andre Drummond's traditionally huge, but you should be investing in playing time in Bona over him at this point if you're trying to figure out what's next after Joel Embiid or during this phase of Joel Embiid's career where he's playing. Who knows how much? And even, you mentioned their identity about wanting to play fast. Like, I'd probably rather see that, okay, downsize, Trendon Watford will give you grab and go stuff at the 5. You will be woefully undersized, but that might just be the case anyway. And they've always been a team that they have Joel Embiid, who's just this behemoth, and then you look at their rebounding numbers and it's always just kind of like, whatever. So let's punt on that anyway.
Yeah. Embiid he's always been a good rebounder because he's bigger than everyone else, but he's never been like a good rebounder in terms of technique. I think he could learn a lot from Drummond in that regard, but frankly, like, I don't want him to be in those scrums by the basket. So I'm okay with him sitting it out there, but like, low-key has not been a great rebounder or a great screener, frankly.
So given the Sixers' financial situation, the uncertainty surrounding Joel Embiid and George, what we've seen from them this offseason, the approach they say they're taking for this season, what is their potential, or what would we view them as? Again, entering this year, so much can play out based on the results, but what do we view them as in a mid-season transaction market? We already mentioned that they'll probably try to duck the tax, but is there wiggle room to where if they're good, that they might want to actually make an acquisition that makes them better, or are they more likely to do something nuclear with trying to get off longer-term money this year?
I mean, one would hope that if Paul George and Embiid are healthy in mid-January, I know there's a lot of time between mid-January and mid-April, but, if they get off on a positive foot this year and they are in the mix for one of the top few seeds in the East, given the current state of the East right now, and that they're probably never going to have a runway like this again, one would hope they would be willing to be buyers because they've already ducked the tax the last couple of years. They've reset the clock on the repeater tax entirely. That is not an issue for them.
Hang the banner. Hang it.
I mean, I think like every year that they do it radicalizes me more and more. But this year, if they did it, that really might. I already wrote I think 1,200 word diatribe last year about the KJ Martin trade because I was just so mad. It's like, you are wasting this contract. You don't have any contracts. You don't have any of these like $8 million contracts that you can trade and that you can aggregate. And so you have this one that has a team option. You could just decline it. So the only effect is on your cap sheet this year. It has no bearing on your cap sheet next year if you don't want it to. And you paid 2 second-round picks to get off of that deal just so you could get under the tax, even though you'd already reset the clock on the repeater tax by that point. If they do that again, when this is like, Paul George is already 35. When you sign Paul George, you figure, the last 2 years of the contract could suck, but at least we got these first 2 to take a real swing at it. Last year obviously went to hell for a number of reasons. Like, this really could be their last best swing at this thing with this big. So I would really sincerely hope that they are not automatically in duck the tax mode. But given how they have operated over the last few years, I'm skeptical until they prove otherwise.
Joel Embiid and Paul George, relative to team friendliness, have the 2 worst contracts in the NBA right now?
I can't think of who's worse. I mean, like
Bradley Beal being off the books, that rebate clause just kind of fluttering into the wind hurts for sure.
Jeremy Grant would be the only other one that comes to mind right away. But I mean, just...
You know who I would nominate just because I think he's so useless and the contract goes on forever?
Who?
Patrick Williams.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like, there are kindergartners who are just being born that will see the end of this Patrick Williams contract, and he's got a player option, basically. So, yeah. But I think they might be. And I remember celebrating what they did last offseason. I think I gave them like an A+++ on their offseason grades. I know he said this on Media Day that he has basically plenty of high-level basketball left in the tank. I kind of believe that Paul George can still be really good. I think I mentioned the word scale down before. I think his game is one that can be scaled down to make a high level impact. And it'll just be a matter of, will he be healthy enough? And with him, this isn't a Joel Embiid situation with a bunch of these chronic injuries. It does feel like he's had like a lot of shoulder stuff maybe throughout his career, but like he just has these injuries that kind of crop up. And so I really think that, and not that his contract will suddenly become movable if they wanted it to, that they'll become a trade asset, but I think that like sort of when we're looking at the 25-26 Sixers and wondering how good they could be, the thing that I just feel like we're not factoring in enough is like, what if Paul George is not the Paul George, peak Paul George or anything close to, like, what if Paul George is just 70-75% of the Paul George that the Sixers thought they were signing, or 50% more available than he was last year, which will help their defense for sure, at least. I like a lot of people can't quit the Sixers. I'm kind of out on the Sixers, but like I can't quit Paul George as the basketball player for some reason.
I mean, I've had this thought. I go back and forth a lot where I feel like the Sixers in general, when expectations are high, is when they crap the bed the hardest. And then when there are zero expectations, that's when they surprise and are actually better than expected. So I think because people are so low on them this year, just by virtue of how this thing goes historically, like this will be one of the up years. And yeah, I mean, like, you know, obviously George missed all of last season effectively with just a variety of injuries. It was just so ineffective when he played. He says he's feeling better than he did last year. And he also said, like, you know, just having more comfort. He's been in the system for a year, knows his teammates better, like personally is just settled, like knows where his kids are going to school, knows where he's living. You know, these are champagne problems for someone making $200 million, but like, you know, it's still, these are people too. And like that much turmoil over a 2 or 3 month span, like, you know, I moved last year with 2 small kids. It really sucks.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is you make more than $200 million, so I just can't empathize with you.
All of my many helpers have really eased the transition here, but yeah. So I think like I don't think he's going to be ready to start the year. At least he didn't make it sound that way. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a real chance that he has some semblance of a bounce back year. I mean, Morey has basically said like, we never got to see the Paul George we expected because Embiid was out of the lineup so much. And like we didn't, when we signed Paul George, we did not expect him to be 27-year-old Paul George who can carry, you know, the Indiana Pacers to the conference finals. Like that player is no longer there. We thought he could carry the team for 10 minutes a game when Embiid was out of the lineup or when Maxi's out of the lineup, or off the floor on a given night. But like we put him in a position that we didn't anticipate. So if Embiid is healthy, or even if he's not, and they just lean into this 4-guard hydra that they have, I think with Paul George, I mean, he's low-key been the third splash brother for most of the past decade. Like he's been one of the best high-volume shooters in the NBA, had a horrible year shooting last year, but one would think we're going to get some positive regression to the mean there. So I'm cautiously optimistic about his outlook, but know that, you know, again, I'm not expecting him to play anywhere close to 82 minutes a game.
What does a scaled down, I meant to ask before, Joel Embiid look like at the offensive end? Is it just more pick and pop to where, or is that, then you're looking at, oh, then he's taking more jumpers. Is that necessarily good for him? But what does a scaled down Joel Embiid look like?
I think he was joking at some point during training camp. He's like, I'm just going to stay in the dunker spot. Everyone else can just go do their thing. So I don't think that's actually going to happen. But, you know, I just don't think he necessarily needs to be as involved in every action. Or, you know, oftentimes it was the Sixers offense was with James Harden was just run pick and roll with him. And that if he gets double teamed, have him pass it out to whoever's open. But like more often than not, possessions were running through him. I don't know that they need to as much anymore. Like maybe there is more of a focus on him setting good hard screens, although that worries me from a wear and tear standpoint. But like,
oh yeah, good point.
But I think
and out to the corner. Yeah, Kevin Love, circa Cleveland treatment.
Right, exactly, yeah. So, I think they have enough firepower that he does not need to be we need to run this entire offense through him. We need to have him touch the ball in every possession. They've got enough guys who can create shots without him. But yeah, I mean, I think, that was the question he was asked, was like, are you willing to take kind of a step back and scale down? And the answer he gave was not entirely encouraging, because he basically was like, I don't really know how to do that. Like, when I'm on the floor, I'm on the floor. I just want to play as hard as I can. It's like, that's great, but we also want you to stay on the floor through April, May, and June.
And it's not even like an effort thing. It would be more of an adaptability thing, towards they're not asking you to half-ass it. They're asking you not to have a usage rate, like finish 40% of our offensive possessions when you're on the floor.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter / lightning round portion of the podcast?
Let's do it.
Looking at the Philadelphia 76ers on paper, what is their single biggest need to you, aside from healthy Joel Embiid? Please don't cop out and say that.
New ownership.
And you said it with a straight face, so come off.
I mean, we've talked about the tax cutting, but I think even in the second apron era, where teams, even people as rich as Steve Ballmer, are balking at going into that territory, but there's still a window between tax and second apron, and if you're not willing to play in that window or arrange some unconventional endorsement deals, then you're going to be behind the eight ball compared to some of these other contenders.
So you think that this might have more to do with ownership than just after extending Joel? Like, things have gone so poorly since they extended Joel Embiid and signed Paul George that they've just decided we're not investing. Like, this core is obsolete to us.
I think there have just been some running themes that predate Daryl Morey, Nick Nurse, Doc Rivers, throughout their entire, this going back to the start of the process era. So there's been one constant, and it's not even Joel Embiid. So it just leads you to...
It's not KJ McDaniels either, sadly.
You know what? He would have absolutely ruled in 2025. I still believe.
Thank you. I believe too. We're on the same page there. Is there anything about this team, storyline, development, flaw, strength, whatever, that's flying under the radar that you believe deserves more of a national spotlight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the offseason moves that they made this summer, non-Quentin Grimes division. I think the Trendon Watford, getting Jabari Walker and Dominic Barlow on two ways, obviously not splashy moves compared to some of the other stuff that happened this year. But again, I think those guys are going to play meaningful roles, and it kind of fit into this larger vision of, we want to get younger, more dynamic, more athletic, more versatile. I think those guys could play a sneaky big role in that.
You did warm my heart before when you said that you think Dominic Barlow is going to play big. I'm a big Dominic Barlow.
Apparently, I was talking to people at Liberty Ballers today. I guess Nick Nurse has been singing his praises at training camp.
And we all know that is definitely a prelude of what is to come.
That's right.
All the time.
Coaches never lie.
Okay, I know this is going to be hard for you, but take a moment, close your eyes, and envision the Sixers are fully healthy. What does a 10-man rotation look like? Who are the 5 starters, and who are your 5 most used reserves?
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, honestly, it sounds like the starters are going to vary, possibly on a game-to-game basis, even when they're healthy. I don't know. Nurse made it sound like he wants to be adaptable this year. So, if they're playing a 3-guard team, it would not shock me if they just match and go with 3 guards in their starting lineup as well. I think, generally speaking, if everyone stayed healthy for 40 or all 82 games, Maxey, Edgecombe, Oubre, George, Embiid are the starters. McCain, Grimes are the 2 key guys off the bench. Drummond, as the main backup center, although one would hope that Bona supplants him at some point this year. Justin Edwards is the key wing off the bench, and then Watford. Apparently, I mean, Nurse sounds very high on Watford, and then Morey chimed in and said, like, Nurse has been trying to get him on the Sixers for a while, said he's been a good fit for a while. So I think Nurse has a soft spot for Trendon Watford.
I think if they want to be able to like push, especially after live dribbles, like he would be someone who plays. Those are the 10, even if you don't believe in the starting lineup being set in stone, those are the 10 players for what it's worth. I have jotted down as like if these were going to be the most used guys. I think given what you've said on this podcast, I would rather Bona be one of them than Drummond at this point, because it doesn't seem like the Sixers are overly concerned with being urgent this year, I guess, which is, I kind of understand it, but it also is kind of a bummer. Either way, I'd like to see, hopefully maybe Bona is the one that we got wrong collectively on that front.
Yes.
So let's say the Sixers are trying to win again and they're fully healthy. I know this will also be matchup dependent, but what should be their go-to closing, the crunch time lineup that sees the most run?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how Edgecombe looks early in the year and how Oubre's shot is, because he was off and on last year. I think he will be the one spot that's up for grabs other than like the 2-guard spot. So it would not shock me if they do a 3-guard, Maxey, Grimes, Edgecombe, George, Embiid. And that's, I mean, it's making a lot of assumptions about Edgecombe hitting the ground running, about Grimes' hard feelings toward the organization not carrying over to the floor. So McCain could be in that mix. Oubre could be in that mix. I think those are the 7 in some capacity, and it's really just pick and choose between Grimes, Edgecombe, Oubre, McCain, alongside Maxey, George, Embiid.
I feel like that should probably be the right answer. Is there a weirdo lineup you want to see Nick Nurse try this year?
Yeah, hell yeah. I want to see 4 guards, man. I want to see all 4 guards in Embiid. We have been, this dream has dangled in front of our face for so long. Let's just see it. It's probably not going to work because you're going to have Edgecombe or Grimes guarding 4s. That feels like a recipe for disaster. But all 4 of those guys could fly up and down the floor, and it could just be a really fun change of pace. You know, you're not doing that as your starting lineup by any means, but if you're going against like a bench heavy reserve unit and those guys can come in and just wreak havoc for it, and you know, if it's Bona instead of Embiid, all the better, because those guys could fly even more.
Oh, I'll pivot a little bit and say I want to see Bona, Watford, Paul George, Justin Edwards, and then give me VJ Edgecombe at 1.
Yeah. Just wreak all sorts of defensive havoc.
Yeah, like defensive versatility. I don't know what you got. Like if Paul George is healthy, like that's someone who could score. VJ Edgecombe can do stuff. Per my notes anyway on the ball. Apparently I forgot about when you said him at point guard. I like scoffed, and then my notes said like, yeah, him on the ball looked pretty good. So Watford, do the grab and go stuff. I don't know if you trust now of all those guys, who's the best one to set up Bona or like in that on offense. So that can get a little iffy. But these are weirdo lineups. That's why they're there. I do have a follow-up question for you then, though.
Okay.
Which lineup configuration sees more time this year? 4 guards or the big 3? And is that a good question?
One would hope the big 3. Man, things went really south if it is the 4 guards more than the big 3.
Well, that means it's a bad question then. If that's far of a departure from one another, that means it's a bad question.
It's not, though, because, I mean, we saw last year, the big 3 played like 193 minutes together, so...
Is that a lot?
I don't know. Can we ask Tom Thibodeau? Can we call him up? What's he better?
He's like, that's 1 game's worth. Yeah. Before I force you to make a couple of predictions, is there anything else, anyone else about this team we haven't discussed, who or that you think deserves more of a conversation?
I would just like to congratulate Kyle Lowry on his player coach role. I do not expect him to play much, if at all, this year. And, you know, I know he's doing some broadcasting work for, I believe, Amazon this year, which is exciting. I think he's going to be great. I'm excited to see the next step of his career. I think he is a valuable mentor for these young guys in particular, to just soak up and be around. And I think going into the season with 14 players on standard contracts, 2 of whom are Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon, worries me a little bit, given the health state of Embiid, George, and now Jared McCain, which and among the reasons I expect the two-way guys to play a fair bit. But yes, I'm very happy for Kyle Lowry that he's gonna end his career in his hometown and then, be a good locker room presence for a team that then has desperately needed one for a while.
I love Kyle Lowry, so I would echo all of that. It is kind of funny that he's gonna sign the deal to be has a side hustle. Whereas a lot of these other players, okay, they have podcasts, but they're not going on broadcast TV until their seasons are over.
Right.
Kyle Lowry's just oh, I might be late to the game. I got to do this NBC Sports.
I mean, Draymond has dabbled in
mid-season too.
I think so, right?
All right. Well, he's not good at it, so Kyle Lowry will probably be good at it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. In general, I'm excited for this new broadcast game. Amazon has assembled a team of people I think are actually be really good at this with Blake and Dirk, and I think D Wade's doing something too, if I remember correctly.
I believe so.
Yeah. I forget which one it was, but one of them said we want to bring positivity back to NBA broadcasts. And I was like, what do you mean back? Wait, when did we have this at any point? But if that's the case,
I guess I grew up in the 90s, so I don't remember what that quote-unquote discourse was like then. Were studio shows just different at that point? Was it more just newsy, stating box score facts and moving on rather than giving opinions and takes?
Yeah, I genuinely don't remember. I mean, Stephen A. Smith has broken my brain to an unprecedented degree that I don't have memories of. But, I see it for the NFL, how ESPN covers the NFL is so radically different than how they cover the NBA that I have hope that other networks have taken note of this and are you know what? Let's actually just promote the game positively and focus on,
Which can be done with, I understand a lot of the tactical, well, I did not expect this tangent to happen, but I understand a lot of the tactical stuff is tougher because the NBA game moves faster and there are more games. But minimum, the positivity is just that it should be easy to implement. It's to just get people who appreciate, and you still see it. I know people hate Reggie Miller on broadcast. He actually still likes the game of basketball. Maybe the bar has been set a little bit. I actively appreciate that. And so whether it's I agree with his opinions or not, just having someone who feels like they appreciate the product that they're watching and everything that gets put into it, that's the bare minimum. And we can't even meet that. Hopefully we have now with the way that the new stuff is, the new partnerships or the TV deal is set up. He says someone who is contracted by the company that lost.
That's right.
Yeah.
So no shots at any former broadcasters, of course. Just talking about current ones.
So I think this is the hardest team to ask this question for. Yeah. But how many games do you have them winning this year, and where do you see them landing in the larger context of the East? You have to factor in everything, the prospect of trades, injuries, everything.
Yeah. I mean, Paul George said last year was rock bottom, and it feels like he was tempting fate with that. Buddy, there's always lower with this team, but we'll assume last year was indeed rock bottom. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think their over-under is set in the low 40s. It wouldn't shock me if they finish over. So I could easily see them winning 45 to 50, making it as a top 6 seed in the playoffs. Do I think they make it past second round? Probably not, because that just is, you're at that point you need all three of George, Embiid, and Maxey to be.
It'd also just be weird to see the Sixers in the conference finals.
Yeah.
So it would just be awkward for everybody.
Wouldn't it just be funny if this was the year it happened though? That's what I'm saying. This is
dangerous though too, right? Would they read into it and then do something just so unbelievably low? We made it to we got swept 4-0 by the Cavs or somebody, but we made it, so now we're going to triple down.
Yeah. Now here's the blank check you wanted, Quentin. We were wrong. Here's $25 million a year next.
They're out there trading VJ Edgecombe for Kawhi Leonard at that point.
Is Kawhi Leonard on a min deal by that point? Has his contract been voided yet?
You could argue that would do the Clippers a favor unless it still counts against their cap sheet.
Yeah.
So are there any teams, like good teams, or supposed to be good teams in the East, that you think the Sixers actually match up particularly well against?
Are the Bucks supposed to be good?
Giannis plus dudes, assume like he will no longer have COVID and can remember his conversations with the coaching staff about the game plan. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty good.
Historically, Embiid has owned Miles Turner, and any team with Kevin Porter Jr. as its starting point guard and Kyle Kuzma as a starting player in its rotation.
Potentially their second option, and if it's not him, it's Kevin Porter Jr.
So I eagerly anticipate that matchup, especially because I don't know if there's a ton of hard feelings from most of the guys who were on the team when Doc was here are gone at this point anyway. But it wouldn't shock me if Maxey still harbors a little bit of resentment for that brief stint on the bench that he supposedly came up with the idea for. So I could see him wanting to have a few extra special revenge games against the Bucks. And then, we'll see. Like, the Cavs, again, like, they are relatively small as well. So this is, at least in the backcourt. So that's where this, 3 or 4 guard lineup has a chance. I think it would be a tough matchup in the front court with, who's guarding Mobley. Like, Embiid presumably drops with Drummond, but they don't have anyone. Like, do you see some Bona Embiid lineups to counter Mobley? I think that would be fun. The Knicks, no, just keep me away. Keep me. That series was just too physical 2 years ago. I want no part of it. I know Tibbs isn't there, but stay away till the conference finals, please.
I want to see regular season context, obviously. I want to see them play the Rockets, but they don't adjust their rotation at all because they'll be so tiny in comparison to the Rockets when they're the lineup where Amen Thompson is just the smallest player on the court, and basically it would be hysterical.
Yeah. I'm here for it, yeah.
Ryan Toporek, can I get one additional Sixers prediction from you for this coming season? It could be whatever you would like.
Yes. My prediction is that they flirt with trading the 2028 Clippers pick.
Ooh.
Absolutely up the wall. If there is no way you could pry that pick from my cold, dead hands until the NBA has ruled on aspiration one way or the other.
What would be a real, what is the bar for returning asset or player that would make you think about doing it right now, let's say? Or before you could say, we know the investigation is going to last through the All-Star break, so past the trade deadline. So what is the type of player? You're not trading it for like a Tari Eason.
No way.
Okay.
I love Tari. Don't get me wrong. I would love him on the Sixers, but especially now that he's set to get paid next summer. That's the Clippers have a completely blank slate in 2027 as of now, other than Zubac and a couple guys on their rookie scale deals, and that pick is in 2028. And yeah, I would have to see it, if they put Kawhi's cap hit on the books through 2027 and they could recoup some of the money that he got from aspiration. There's just no way. I think that the disaster potential for the Clippers is so high that it would have to be a true difference maker. If it was Paul George and the 2028 pick for a younger star who's on a cheaper contract, maybe. But I don't know.
Lowry Market and Aaron Younger.
That was the name that I don't know that I would do. I don't think that Lowry's the bar. I think it would have to be higher than that. I'd rather just eat the George contract and because that, look, it might not work out. It might end up being a mid to late first round pick, but it's fully unprotected. It has some jackpot upside.
So that's not. I'm trying to. Yeah, I don't even see like a good team. That would be the metal ball doesn't make any sense for you there. Yeah, it is a crown jewel. I'm just trying to think of a good player that would try. Like, could it make you think about moving it right now? That's not too outside their own possibility. And then also a lot of the ones that are springing to mind for me are just big men, and that's not what you're going to be looking for.
Yeah.
Here,
Jimmy Butler. Are we Paul George in the pick for Jimmy Butler?
be really mate.
I wouldn't do it. Like, I'd rather, again, just eat the extra year.
No, I think for an aging star, that makes total sense. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that either. What about still big Anthony Davis? Pair Anthony Davis with Joel Embiid?
No. Oh, yeah. Well, just what they need. Another injury-prone big man. That sounds great.
What about, I don't know why they would trip, but Memphis tears it down? Jared Jackson Jr.? Is that what you thinking?
No. I mean, you would want another wing, if anything, and that, like,
Trey Murphy in New Orleans?
Okay, now we're talking.
Okay.
Now we're
I
talking.
don't think they're going to trade him. I think he's might be like the single most important player in the building, right?
One would hope, but yeah.
Okay, what if the Knicks decide to pivot? Does OG still do it for you? Or you want Mikal Bridges back? You guys to kind of complete the cycle, like he'll finally suit up?
The return of Mikal Bridges. I would love Mikal Bridges back, but no, I would not. Not until we had clarity. Once we have clarity, that pick might be up for grabs, but not until we know the scope of what Adam Silver is about to do to that team.
Mr. Toporek, this was fantastic as always. Welcome back to the Look Ahead series. Love talking hoops with you and talking to you in general. Can you just tell our audience where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
For sure. For Sixers stuff on Liberty Ballers at SB Nation. I'm also doing some stuff for Forbes Sports, mostly salary cap stuff, some Sixers stuff there as well. And then fan-sided as well, doing all sorts of NBA coverage there. After we get off here, I'm going to be writing about some Quentin Grimes and then questioning why Bradley Beal is locked into the Clippers starting lineup already. So that's
he's gonna be an elite defender again.
That's right.
Emphasis on again.
Right. For all of those times he was before that I definitely remember very clearly in my head. Yes. So Dan, thank you as always for having me. It's always good to catch up with you, my friend. Keep up the great work. You're still a sicko for doing every single team like this, but one day you will see the light and realize it's not the way to get ahead in this industry, man.
No, I think honestly, I'm going to stop watching games this year, even though people don't think I watch them anyway. And I'm just going to see where maybe this is the year that I end up on, broadcast television or something at that point. So
is there not some AI that can just summarize games for us? What are we doing here?
You know what I'm really upset about? And I made a note. I was supposed to introduce this as the Thunder Buddies podcast because you and I both agreed that we were going to start a Thunder podcast. This was in the thick of their rebuild.
Yes.
That everyone thought was going to last forever. And so now we have this running joke that we're just going to do Thunder. We're going to pivot all the way into Thunder content. We didn't make that joke once until almost the hour and 20-minute mark. So I'm assuming dozens of people, maybe hundreds. I think we've kept hundreds through the end, but that might be it.
I'm just happy we were vindicated. But, the Eagles won a championship this year. My beloved Thunder won a championship this year. So the Sixers can't hurt me anymore.
The Thunder gave me some Teflon. I'm inoculated against a little bit, but seeing Saquon Barkley I'm a Giants fan. Seeing Saquon Barkley ranked by NFL.com or whatever it was the best player in the NFL was just, he had won the Super Bowl too, and it's freaking Giants, man. It used to be a proper organization. I don't know what happened.
On the bright side, he's after his eventful offseason has not been nearly as good this year. So the Super Bowl curse lives on.
I'll pretend like I knew that already, as if I followed the NFL really intimately. Yeah, I knew that. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. But thank you again, Brian. As you know by now, I'll be pestering you again down the line. I'll talk to you soon.